It was a bright, sunny afternoon in the bustling city of Brightwood. People were going about their day, busy with errands and conversations, filling the air with a sense of normalcy. Amid the crowd was Marie, a black woman in her early 40s, gracefully maneuvering her wheelchair along the sidewalk. Life hadn't been easy for her since the accident that left her disabled, but she carried herself with dignity. Her bright smile and calm demeanor made her a beacon of hope in her local community. Mary was on her way to the local grocery store to pick up essentials. Despite her circumstances, she always preferred to do things on her own. As she entered the store, she nodded politely to the security guard and exchanged warm greetings with the cashier, who knew her by name. Unbeknownst to her, tension was brewing in another part of the store. A misunderstanding at the checkout counter between a white police officer named Officer Daniels and another customer had left the officer agitated. Daniels, known for his short temper, was in no mood for compromise. Marie, unaware of the brewing storm, calmly browsed the aisles, picking up items from her shopping list. The store was moderately busy, with families and individuals moving through the space, creating a steady hum of chatter. As Marie reached the checkout counter, her bag accidentally brushed against a display shelf, causing a few small items to fall. She quickly apologized and started picking them up, her movements limited but steady. However, Officer Daniels, already frustrated, perceived her actions as deliberate and disrespectful. He approached her, his tone sharp. "Ma'am, are you going to clean this up or just sit there?" he barked, his voice cutting through the noise of the store. Marie, startled, looked up at him and replied calmly, "I'm picking them up, sir. There's no need to raise your voice." But Daniels wasn't satisfied. His voice grew louder, drawing the attention of nearby shoppers. "People like you think you can do whatever you want. Show some respect." The tension in the store thickened as other customers paused to watch the unfolding scene. Marie, trying to keep her composure, said, "I'm doing my best. There's no need to escalate this." But Daniels, blinded by his frustration, misinterpreted her words as defiance. Without warning, he roughly elbowed her wheelchair, causing Marie to jolt backward slightly. The room fell silent, shock rippling through the crowd. A young man in a hoodie, who had been watching from a distance, immediately stepped forward. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" he shouted at Daniels. His voice was firm and full of anger. The officer turned to face the man, his expression hardening. "Stay out of this," he snapped. Marie, her voice trembling but steady, said, "It's okay. Please don't make it worse." But the young man wasn't having it. He locked eyes with Daniels and said, "You have no idea who you just disrespected." Daniels scoffed, dismissing the comment. But little did he know, this incident would set off a chain of events that would unravel everything he thought he knew about power, privilege, and respect. The grocery store was eerily silent after Officer Daniels' aggressive action. Marie sat in her wheelchair, her heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. The officer's elbowing had shaken her both physically and emotionally. She had spent years learning how to stand up for herself, but this public humiliation cut deeply. Nearby shoppers, frozen in shock, began murmuring among themselves. "Did he just do that?" whispered an elderly woman clutching her basket. "That's not right," said another man, shaking his head. The young man who had confronted Daniels earlier stepped closer, his protective instincts on full display. "What is wrong with you?" the young man demanded, his voice filled with anger. "She's done nothing to you." His presence was commanding, and it was clear he wasn't going to back down. Daniels turned to him, his expression hard and dismissive. "I told you to stay out of this. This is none of your business," he said coldly. The young man, whose name was Jordan, stood his ground. "It is my business when you disrespect someone for no reason," he shot back. "This woman didn't deserve your aggression." Marie finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Please, let it go. I don't want anyone getting hurt because of me." Jordan turned to her, his face softening. "Ma'am, you don't have to accept this. You deserve respect, just like anyone else." Daniels, clearly irritated by the growing attention, decided to double down. "If you don't step back, you'll regret it," he warned Jordan. But the officer's tone only fueled the crowd's unease. More people were now gathering, pulling out their phones to record the incident. The tide of public opinion was shifting, and Daniels could feel it. A woman in a business suit stepped forward. "Officer, your behavior is completely uncalled for," she said firmly. "This is a public space, and we won't stand for this." Daniels' face reddened. He was losing control of the situation, and it made him defensive. "I'm doing my job," he barked. "You all need to step back and let me handle this." But the crowd didn't step back. If anything, their presence grew stronger. Several people began speaking up in defense of Marie, recounting what they had seen. "She didn't do anything wrong." Someone shouted, "You're abusing your authority." Another voice added. Marie, overwhelmed by the attention, tried to calm the situation. "Please," she said, looking at the crowd. "Thank you for standing up for me, but I don't want this to escalate." Jordan crouched down next to her, speaking softly. "Ma'am, you shouldn't have to go through this. People need to know what's happening here." Unbeknownst to Daniels, Jordan was no ordinary bystander. He had spent years building a successful tech company and was now one of the wealthiest young entrepreneurs in the city. But Jordan wasn't one to flaunt his wealth or status. He believed in standing up for what was right, and today, he couldn't ignore the injustice in front of him. Daniels noticed the phones recording him and tried to regain control. "Stop recording. This is police business," he yelled, but his demand only fueled the crowd's determination. Jordan stood up and looked Daniels in the eye. "You've messed with the wrong person today," he said calmly but firmly. "Do you even know who she is?" Daniels scoffed. "I don't care who she is. She's disrupting this store, and I'm here to deal with it." Jordan smirked slightly, his confidence growing. "Well, you're about to find out," he said. He then pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's time for you to learn about consequences," he added. The tension in the room thickened as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Marie looked at Jordan, puzzled but hopeful, as a glimmer of change began to take shape. Marie sat quietly in her wheelchair, overwhelmed by the escalating situation. Her mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. Around her, the crowd grew larger, their murmurs and whispers blending into a low hum of discontent. She glanced at Jordan, the young man who had stood up for her, now on the phone, speaking in a calm but serious tone. Officer Daniels paced in frustration. The growing crowd and the pointed phone cameras made him uneasy. He was used to being in control, but this situation was slipping out of his hands. "Everyone, disperse now," Daniels barked, trying to regain authority. His voice echoed across the store, but the crowd held firm. Jordan ended his call and slipped his phone into his pocket. He looked directly at Daniels, his expression calm yet determined. "You'll want to rethink your actions," Jordan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made everyone pause. Daniels smirked, masking his unease. "And why's that? You think your little show here will scare me?" Jordan stepped closer, keeping his voice steady. "It's not about scaring you. It's about accountability. You've crossed a line, and you'll be held responsible for it." Daniels scoffed and turned away, addressing the crowd. "This is a routine police matter. You all need to stop interfering." But the crowd didn't budge. Instead, more people began speaking out. "We saw everything." One woman yelled, "You attacked her for no reason." Another voice added. The tension was palpable. Marie, feeling the weight of the situation, finally spoke up. "Please, everyone. I don't want things to get worse." Her voice was gentle but filled with emotion. She looked at Jordan, gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for standing up for me, but let's not make this into something bigger." Jordan crouched down next to her, his tone softening. "Ma'am, this isn't just about today. This is about making sure no one else goes through what you've experienced. You deserve respect and justice." Just as he finished speaking, the store's front doors swung open, and two men in suits walked in. They carried an air of authority, their movements purposeful and direct. The crowd parted to let them through, curiosity and anticipation hanging thick in the air. Daniel's posture stiffened as he recognized one of the men. It was Captain Wallace, his superior. The second man, however, was unfamiliar to him. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded confidence. His calm demeanor hinted at someone used to handling high-stakes situations. Captain Wallace approached Daniels, his face a mix of disappointment and frustration. "Daniels, what's going on here?" he demanded. Before Daniels could respond, the second man stepped forward. "I can explain," Jordan said, extending his hand toward the suited man. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Marie watched in surprise as the two shook hands. "Jordan, good to see you," the suited man said with a nod. "I got your call. Let's take care of this." Daniels looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "Who is this?" he asked, pointing at Jordan. The suited man turned to Daniels, his gaze steady. "This is Jordan Matthews," he said, "and I'd advise you to listen carefully, because you've just made a very big mistake." The name sent a ripple through the crowd. Whispers spread as people recognized the name of the young tech mogul who had made headlines for his groundbreaking innovations and philanthropy. Daniel's confidence faltered as he processed the information. "I don't see what this has to do with anything," he stammered. Jordan stepped forward, his tone firm but composed. "It has everything to do with it. This woman you attacked is my mother, and I won't let this slide." The crowd gasped in unison, the weight of Jordan's words sinking in. Marie's eyes widened in shock, her mind reeling. She had no idea who Jordan was until now. The pieces were falling into place, and the situation was far from over. The atmosphere in the store was tense as Jordan's words hung in the air. Marie, sitting in her wheelchair, looked up at him with a mix of confusion and astonishment. The whispers from the crowd grew louder as they realized the man standing up for her wasn't just any bystander. He was a prominent figure they'd seen on the news. Officer Daniels, however, wasn't ready to back down. His face turned red with frustration, and he pointed at Jordan. "I don't care who you are. This has nothing to do with you." Jordan turned to face Daniels, his expression calm but firm. "It has everything to do with me. You assaulted my mother without any reason, and now you'll be held accountable." Marie blinked, her hands gripping the edges of her wheelchair. "Your mother?" she asked, her voice soft but full of disbelief. Jordan knelt beside her, his eyes meeting hers. "Yes, ma'am," he said gently. "I found out a few years ago. You adopted me when I was a baby, and though we lost contact, I never stopped looking for you. Seeing you like this, treated so unfairly, breaks my heart." Tears welled up in Marie's eyes. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The boy she had adopted so many years ago, whom she had lost contact with due to unforeseen circumstances, had grown into this strong, confident man standing before her. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. The crowd was now silent, watching the emotional exchange unfold. Even Daniels seemed momentarily taken aback, unsure of how to proceed. Captain Wallace stepped forward, breaking the silence. "Officer Daniels," he said sharply, "this is serious. You're being accused of misconduct. We need to handle this properly." Daniels straightened up, his voice defensive. "I was just doing my job." She resisted, and... "Resisted what?" Jordan interrupted, his tone rising slightly. "She was minding her own business when you decided to use unnecessary force. There's no excuse for what you did." The crowd murmured in agreement, several people nodding and pointing at their phones, where they had recorded the entire incident. It was clear that Daniel's version of events wouldn't hold up. The suited man who had arrived with Captain Wallace stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "I'm Peter Lawson, legal counsel for Mr. Matthews," he announced. "We're going to make sure justice is served. If anyone here has video evidence or witnessed the incident, please share it with me." Dozens of people raised their phones, eager to help. They began sending their videos to Lawson, who promised that every detail would be reviewed. Marie looked at Jordan, her voice shaking. "You didn't have to do this for me." Jordan smiled softly. "I did, Mom. You've always been there for me, even when life wasn't kind to us. Now it's my turn to protect you." The moment was interrupted by the sound of more sirens outside. A second police car pulled up, and 2 officers entered the store. They looked at Captain Wallace, who gestured for them to take Daniels aside. "You're being placed on administrative leave, Daniels," Wallace said firmly. "We'll investigate this thoroughly." Daniels protested, his voice rising. "This isn't fair. I didn't do anything wrong." But his words fell on deaf ears as the 2 officers escorted him out of the store. The crowd cheered, their faith in justice momentarily restored. Marie reached out and took Jordan's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you," she said, her tears now flowing freely. "Thank you for standing up for me." Jordan nodded, his expression full of warmth. "This is just the beginning, Mom. We're going to make sure this never happens again." As the crowd began to disperse, many stayed to offer their support, sharing their own stories of overcoming injustice. For Marie, it wasn't just about the moment. It was about the newfound connection with her son and the hope for a better future. As Officer Daniels was escorted out of the store, his protests echoing behind him, Marie and Jordan found themselves surrounded by supportive strangers. People approached Marie, offering words of encouragement and sharing their own experiences with injustice. Jordan stood protectively by her side, thanking those who had recorded the incident and ensured there was evidence of what had happened. Captain Wallace stayed behind, ensuring everything was under control. He turned to Jordan and Marie, his voice steady but sincere. "We will take this matter seriously. I can't promise immediate justice, but I assure you, Officer Daniels' actions won't go unexamined." Jordan nodded, appreciating Wallace's professionalism. "That's all we ask," he replied. "We just want accountability." Meanwhile, Peter Lawson, Jordan's legal counsel, had already begun collecting statements from witnesses. He approached Jordan with a determined look. "We have more than enough evidence to take legal action," Lawson said. "This isn't just about one officer's misconduct. It's about sending a message that abuse of power won't be tolerated." Marie, still shaken but finding strength in the support around her, looked at Lawson. "I don't want this to happen to anyone else," she said softly. "If my experience can prevent another person from being treated this way, then it's worth fighting for." Jordan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll make sure your voice is heard, Mom," he said gently. "You've been through enough." Outside the store, news vans had started to gather. Word of the incident had spread quickly, and reporters were eager to cover the story. Jordan hesitated, knowing the media attention could be both a blessing and a curse. But Marie, with newfound determination, surprised him. "Let's talk to them," she said firmly. "If this story can make a difference, then I want people to hear it." Jordan nodded, proud of her courage. Together, they stepped outside, where reporters immediately swarmed them with questions. Marie took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady despite the nerves. "I want to thank everyone who stood up for me today," she began. "What happened in that store wasn't right, but the support I've received gives me hope. This isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." The crowd around them applauded, and Jordan followed up with his own statement. "This isn't just an isolated incident. It's part of a bigger issue that we need to address. My mother's courage today is a reminder that we all have the power to stand up for what's right." The reporters eagerly captured every word, broadcasting the story to a nationwide audience. Social media exploded with hashtags supporting Marie and calling for justice. Videos of the incident went viral, sparking conversations about police conduct and the importance of accountability. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels sat in a holding room at the precinct, fuming. He refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, but the overwhelming evidence against him left little room for denial. Captain Wallace, determined to maintain the integrity of the department, initiated an internal investigation, ensuring Daniels would face the consequences of his actions. Back at the store, Jordan helped Marie into his car, promising to take her home and make sure she was comfortable. As they drove away, Marie turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you today," she said quietly. Jordan smiled, his voice warm. "You don't have to face anything alone anymore, Mom. We're in this together." That night, as they sat in her small apartment, the phone rang nonstop with calls of support. Community leaders, activists, and even old friends reached out, offering their help. For Marie, it was overwhelming, but also deeply moving. She realized that her story had touched a chord with people far beyond her neighborhood. Jordan, ever the protector, began planning their next steps. "We're going to see this through," he said firmly. "Not just for you, but for everyone who's been silenced." As Marie nodded, a sense of purpose filled the room. This was no longer just about what had happened to her. It was about creating change that would resonate far beyond their lives. The following morning, the story had become a national sensation. News channels aired clips of Marie's brave statement, and social media platforms were buzzing with hashtags like #JusticeForMarie and #StandWithMary. The community rallied behind her, with messages of support pouring in from all over the country. People shared their own experiences with injustice, adding their voices to the growing movement. Jordan sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone as messages of encouragement flooded in. "Mom, you've become a symbol of strength," he said, looking up at Marie, who was sitting across from him with a cup of tea. Marie gave him a small smile, still overwhelmed by all the attention. "I never thought something like this would happen," she said softly. "But if it can help others, I'm willing to keep fighting." Jordan's phone buzzed with another call. It was Peter Lawson, their lawyer. "Jordan, we got a lot of momentum," Peter said. "I've been contacted by several civil rights groups who want to support your case. They're offering resources and legal expertise. This could be bigger than just one lawsuit." Jordan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "We'll do whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen again," he replied. That afternoon, a community rally was held in front of the store where the incident took place. Hundreds of people showed up, carrying signs that read "Justice for Marie" and "Stop Abuse of Power." Jordan helped Marie to the stage, where she was greeted with applause and cheers. Taking a deep breath, Marie stepped up to the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "What happened to me was wrong, but it's not just about me. It's about all the people who have been hurt by those in power. Together, we can make sure this stops." The crowd erupted into applause, and Jordan felt a swell of pride. His mother, who had always been so humble and reserved, was now standing tall and speaking out for justice. The rally was a turning point, solidifying the community's commitment to supporting Marie and holding the officer accountable. Meanwhile, at the police precinct, Captain Wallace was working tirelessly to ensure that the investigation into Officer Daniels' conduct was thorough and unbiased. He met with the internal affairs team, sharing all the evidence and witness statements that had been collected. "This department has no room for misconduct," Captain Wallace said firmly. "We owe it to the community to show that we take these matters seriously." Officer Daniels, now suspended from duty, was beginning to feel the consequences of his actions. His arrogance had turned into fear as he realized the magnitude of the public outrage. He sat in his home, watching news reports and scrolling through social media, where his name had become synonymous with abuse of power. Back at the rally, Jordan was approached by several community leaders who wanted to collaborate on broader initiatives for police reform. "This is just the beginning," one leader said. "We need to make sure this momentum leads to real change." Jordan nodded, determined to keep pushing forward. "We're not stopping until there's accountability," he replied. As the rally continued, Marie found herself surrounded by people who shared stories of their own struggles. She listened intently, offering words of comfort and solidarity. For the first time, she realized the power of her voice and the impact she could have. That evening, as Jordan and Marie returned home, they sat together and reflected on the day. "You were amazing out there," Jordan said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Marie smiled, her eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and hope. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "But we still have a long way to go." Jordan nodded, knowing she was right. The fight was far from over, but they were no longer alone. Together, with the support of their community and the nation, they were ready to take the next steps toward justice and change. The days following the rally were a whirlwind of activity for Marie and Jordan. News outlets continued to highlight the story, and public interest in the case only grew stronger. Marie's bravery and Jordan's determination became symbols of resilience and hope for countless people across the nation. As the legal process moved forward, their lawyer, Peter Lawson, filed a formal lawsuit against Officer Daniels and the department. The suit sought accountability not only for the harm caused to Marie, but also for systemic changes to ensure such incidents wouldn't happen again. The court hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed with supporters, journalists, and community leaders. Marie, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, walked in with Jordan by her side. Despite her nerves, she held her head high, ready to speak her truth. Officer Daniels, sitting at the defense table, looked pale and tense. The pressure from the media and the community had clearly shaken him. His legal team was prepared to argue that his actions were not intentional, but the evidence against him was strong. Peter Lawson began his arguments with a powerful opening statement. "This case is not just about one person's pain. It's about holding those in power accountable for their actions. Marie did not deserve to be treated with disrespect, and today we seek justice." Marie was called to the stand, and as she spoke about the incident, the courtroom was silent. Her voice trembled at times, but her words were steady and impactful. She recounted the fear she felt during the altercation and the emotional toll it had taken on her since. "I never thought I would find myself in this position," Marie said, looking directly at the jury. "But if sharing my story can prevent this from happening to someone else, then it's worth it." The prosecution presented video footage from the store, which clearly showed Officer Daniels' aggressive behavior. Witness testimonies from bystanders further supported Marie's account. The evidence was undeniable, and the jury listened intently as the case unfolded. When it was time for Officer Daniels to testify, his tone was defensive. He claimed he acted out of stress and poor judgment, but his words lacked sincerity. The contrast between his testimony and Marie's heartfelt account was stark. By the end of the hearing, the jury was visibly moved. After deliberating for several hours, they returned with a unanimous verdict. Officer Daniels was found guilty of misconduct. The court ordered him to pay a fine and attend mandatory training on de-escalation and bias prevention. Additionally, the department was required to implement new policies to improve accountability and training for its officers. Outside the courthouse, a large crowd of supporters cheered as Marie and Jordan emerged. Journalists rushed forward, microphones and cameras in hand, but Marie raised her hand to quiet them. "Today is not just a victory for me," she said, her voice steady. "It's a step toward justice for everyone who has ever felt powerless." Jordan placed a hand on his mother's shoulder, proud of her strength and resilience. "You've inspired so many people, Mom," he said. "This is just the beginning." As they returned home that evening, Marie and Jordan reflected on how far they had come. The journey had been difficult, but it had also brought them closer together. They had turned pain into purpose and shown the world the power of standing up for what is right. In the weeks that followed, Jordan used his resources to establish a foundation in Marie's name. The foundation aimed to provide legal support and resources for individuals facing injustice, ensuring that no one would have to fight alone. Marie, now a voice for change, continued to speak at community events and rallies. Though the experience had been harrowing, it had also given her a new sense of purpose. Together, she and Jordan proved that even in the face of adversity, hope and determination could lead to meaningful change.